Hello there. What is going on, everyone? Today we are going to be taking a look at Ynarros Fallin. This is a game of shamans scouring a mystical realm, collecting magical crystals, energy, magical lands, and doing shamanistic battles with enemy shaman. We're going to be taking a look at some of the gameplay, the components, and telling you where you can find out more. If you're interested in pledging for this upcoming Kickstarter, there's going to be a link in the video description below. Also, if you like what you see and you want to stick around here, I invite you to subscribe, leave a comment, all that good stuff. It really helps out the channel. So, all the links that we've got, social media links, and all that other stuff are going to be down in the video description below. But with all that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at Ynarros Fallin. So one of the things we're going to be doing in Ynarros Fallin is moving our shaman and followers around the map, trying to pick up different crystals, trying to get different locations, which are going to be added to our battle board down here, which give us points. We'll also be trying to draw cards and discard some of them to increase our movement die. This is what's going to allow us to move around the board a little bit faster, so we can take our movement points and kind of give us more freedom to collect different locations, do battle with enemy shamans over here. On the battle board, we have a really cool little mini game that happens when we're doing battle. We're going to talk about that a little bit. And basically, you're going to win the game by having either 4 complete victories against your opponent. If you're able to take all of their life crystals through battle, you're going to end the game early and win outright. Or you can trigger end game through various different ways, like having all of the most of the locations discovered. And whoever has the most victory points, which are going to be over here, we have the 1s and 10s place on victory points, or they call those experience in this game. But we have 2 different really cool types of miniatures, and I'm going to show them to you. So here on my hearth, we've got the shamans, which spawn closest to the main board and have the fewest number of hexes that they will need to travel to get to important locations. Shaman are important for that aspect in that anytime they complete a task, they'll always respawn right here in your hearth, which is very, very close. But farther away you've got, which is like 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces away, you've got the follower. The follower is not quite as good as the shaman. The follower is got an extra 4 movement, and just until he can get to the hearth. And anytime the follower completes a task, he will spawn back here at the little island here. Sometimes called the hut. Now, the really cool thing about this, now these are deluxe components. Everything you're going to see here is subject to change, but this is prototype stuff we're looking at here. But this is generally a really cool aspect of it, as you have these little masks. So if he ever gets upgraded, if he ever learns the ways of the shaman and becomes more powerful, you can put the little mask on him, and all of a sudden he's a shaman. And if he were to fall very, very bad in combat and were to be downgraded, you could just take this mask off, and then he would return to the game as a follower. If he, you can't lose your mask as a shaman, right? So that's a very cool thing. So the beginning of my turn, I have the deeds phase, which I can do 2 actions. One of those things is I can reference my die here, and I can move. Now, if my die is currently set to 4, it means I get 4 movement points. Now, this is a standard D6, but however, it's not quite so standard because it starts at 2 and goes up to 7. All right, so we're going to have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So if I'm at 4, I can all of a sudden move 4 points for one of my actions. Now, I can take the same action twice if I'd like to. So I can take my shaman, move him around 4 points, and that's certainly something that I can do. If I have a follower, I can start moving my follower. That would be 4 points there, but that doesn't really get me anywhere good. I want to get out to where those crystals are, right? So movement is very, very important in this game because it sets up everything else that happens after movement. But that's only one of the available actions that I can do. Sometimes you want this die to go up because at the end of my turn, this die's value is going to decrease by 1. It's always going to go down by 1, and of course, unless it's 2, which would be the minimum. So if I don't want to be stuck moving only 3 points next turn, I may want to think about a way to get this die up. One of the other actions I can do is discard cards. If I have cards in my hand, I can discard cards, and however many cards I discard, I will increase the value of this die. Now, if I'm thinking about moving, I may want to discard cards first, because if I discard 3 cards, that'll bump this up to a 7. Now all of a sudden I have 7 points of movement for my second action. However, another action I can do is to draw cards, because I might not start out with any cards, and I may need to draw some cards. However, if I draw cards and then discard cards, I won't have an action left to move. So already you can see that there is a little bit of balancing act in whether you're drawing cards, discarding cards, moving. And the final type of action is called control, and that's going to be dealing with these crystals. Now, crystals are important for numerous different ways. First off, they power the control action. They can also, you can reference this little part of the board over here, because if you have crystals, you can also turn those in to gain victory points or experience. Having 2 of one color and 1 of another gets you 10. Having 3 of the same color gets you 12. Having 1 of each color gets you 15. So you can have lots of experience gains from having crystals. But if you don't want to spend crystals on experience, you can do the control action. And these crystals they come in a couple of different types, right? You've got your orange crystal, you've got your green crystal, and you've got your red crystals. There are also the black cubes, which don't actually count as crystals. We just use those to mark if a certain land has been used or not, or if different things have been happened. And of course, there are also pink crystals. We're going to talk about those later, but those deal with the combat. But basically, you can spend one of these crystals to do different effects. So one of the things that you can do is you can spend a green crystal to copy the green ability of one of your opponent's green lands. So if my opponent had this over there, I could go ahead and spend a green crystal. I would want to mark that over on their board to indicate that I've already used that this turn. I can spend a red crystal to borrow the value of my opponent's die and get some extra movement from that as well. So that's you're basically summing the value of the 2 dice together, yours and theirs, and you get some extra movement out of it. So it's a really nice kind of supercharged move. And then I can spend the orange crystal to roll a battle die, and the battle dies are on the battle board, and that's going to basically lower my opponent's soul or their power for the next combat. So it's almost like a little thwack, kind of like an early hit on the next combat. And again, combat we're going to talk about a little bit later, but that's a very important part of the game. So these crystal actions are very, very strong, but you're not going to have too many crystals, so you have to use them very sparingly. So if I use an action to draw cards, I'm going to take 5 cards off the top of this shared deck over here, and it's a big deck. There's only 3 types of cards in there, and when I'm discarding cards for increasing my movement die, this doesn't really matter, right? So like I'm only really concerned with how many cards I'm discarding, but later on, you're gonna notice that like you've got cards that either have blue symbols or yellow symbols. There are a couple of cards that have both, so those can be wild. It can be whichever you want, which is very, very cool. But this is all the cards in the deck. Now these are going to be used in combat, which we'll talk about later on. But these cards are valuable because you're going to want them periodically throughout the game to discard and increase the value of this die. Because again, this goes down at the end of each of your turns. But you're also going to want these when we get into combat because you're going to be discarding or playing some of these to try to defeat your opponent in the Shaman versus Shaman galactic battle of magics and greatness. And so cards are multi-value. You can only have 10 though. So when you play a draw card action, you're going to get 5 cards. If you do that twice in one turn and just start off with 10 cards, you're going to be golden, but you're going to have very, very few movement points, and also won't have the action available to move. So it's definitely a balancing act. So after my actions are over, let's say I moved up to this spot right here. These tiles are pretty cool because there's a couple of different things about these tiles. First off, they have a red crystal on them. Red crystals are one of the more powerful types of crystals out of the orange, green, and red that you've got. I think the red are kind of one of the more dangerous because they can do a lot more like player versus player or shaman versus shaman oriented effects. But you can come here. If you end your turn here, you can take this crystal or you can leave it there to protect you from combat. Because if your opponent tries to do a combat against you and you have a red crystal there, basically if your yellow shaman tried to move on here, they would have to discard a red crystal in order to do combat against you. So that's always a nice thing, or you could pick it up so you can have a red crystal of your own. Regardless of whether you chose to leave it there or not, you're going to have a tile here, and then you'll flip it over to the active side, and what that's going to do is it's going to look at one of your magic lands here that are all face down. Now these magic lands can have different effects on them, different trigger cases, and these happen to be green magic lands in this pile, but they can be green or orange. And you're going to look at all of the different backs of them, and whichever has the most number of bright white filled in circles, in this case this one has 4, so this one would be the most, but let's just say it were here instead, I would be like, oh, we got 2, 2, 1, and then 4 over here, so the top one would flip over, and then now this would become active. Now, when it's active, that's pretty cool. All right, so when we've got the magic lands active, and again, being here only activates one at a time. So over the course of the game, and the more people you have out, again, if I had 2 out, for example, then I would activate 2. But they have different requirements. So on a subsequent move action, if I wanted to end movement here, then I could attempt to conquer this land. And conquering that land is very, very good because you want to have the more lands you have, the more victory points you're going to have at the end of the game. So if I were to conquer this one, now there's 2 different types of requirements. Sometimes you're going to have a square, and this basically means that the value of my die here, my movement die, also sometimes called the shadow die, it needs to at least be 6. So in this case, if I were at a 5, I would not be I wouldn't be strong enough to conquer this land. But if, let's just say I had upgraded to 7, then I would definitely have that, and I could go ahead and take this, and this would go into my board, and whoever was on that spot would then go back to their starting area. Since this guy is just a follower, he would go all the way back to the little floating rock hut, which is farther away. So there's definitely a little bit more of a cost for capturing lands and doing tasks with followers. You kind of want your shaman to be able to do those if he can. So if my shaman got it, he would go back to the hearth and he would start much closer to the next one. Of course, the rest of them in the pile would be face down, so they'd have to be activated once again. Other types of requirements will sometimes show having 2 different workers on the board, and this means they must actually be on the main island. And if so, to capture them, it doesn't matter what value my die is, I just have to have 2 workers out there, whether they be shaman or follower, and then they both go back to their starting area in order to claim this one. So it's definitely a different cost. So sometimes you need a big die, sometimes you need multiple people out there. But once you claim them, they go into your board. And so here, for example, I have 2 magical lands claimed. Having just 1 end game would be 5 victory points. Having 2 end game would be 10 victory points, and of course then be 15. Now, if I ever get my final land and I have all 6, that is one of the end game triggers. So of course I'll then have a max of 40 points, and that's great. And that's definitely something you want, to have a big 40-point lead once you trigger end game. But also, even if I haven't gotten that one, each of the different magical lands have some kind of extra way that they benefit you. So the green lands give me a one-time use benefit, whereas the orange lands will give me a permanent increase in power. One more thing about locations, the red lands always start in the middle, and you don't actually take those to your board. Those actually are exhausted when they're used. They also have a destiny tracker that is going to tick down. Now, if you are here and you're trying to get red crystals out of this one, that's fine. But another thing about my particular location here is that I have a straight line of sight to an enemy shaman. And that's one of the things that can allow me to do the control where I'm spending crystals. If this enemy shaman, for example, were here, I wouldn't have a straight hex line. Whoops, stand up there. I wouldn't have a straight hex line because boom, 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 or boom, boom, boom. So you need to have. So that's when sometimes you might want to end your movement on a place that is not a power hex, for example, because you may want to be targeting enemy shaman. There's also movement directly to an enemy shaman's space, and when that happens, we get to talk about combat. So now we're going to move over to the side of the board. Now we keep our 2 shaman that are already engaged in combat. Like, so let's say they were here and they were fighting, they're going to stay there, and then these are kind of representing the enemy shaman. They're going to start off in the middle, and this is kind of our battle board. Anytime we take wounds, we'll go down, boom, 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 boom. And when my opponent takes wounds, we go down, boom, 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 boom. Now, this isn't a straight battle to the death. This is a battle to exhaustion. So we're going to keep going back and forth, laying down either cards or crystals. And when we do that, we're going to gain points that we can either push, kind of a tug of war battle, where we can push our opponent either closer towards the pink skull. That's going to be on their side right there. Or heal ourselves closer towards the center. Can't ever heal myself past the center. I can't push myself over to this side, and my opponent can't heal himself closer to my side. So the top for each of us is here. Now, what will happen is I have the option to play some different cards to gain loot or to gain points. So if I play, I'm blue. So on my turn, I may play a yellow card. That is my opponent's color, so that's just going to give me 1 point, and I could push my opponent back 1. Now, my opponent on their turn, they might play a yellow card as well, but since that's their own color, that's going to get them 2 points. So they could push me back 2. Boom, boom. Now, on my turn then, I could play a blue card since I am a blue player. That's going to give me 2 points. So I now have a choice. I can either push him back 2, or I can heal myself up 2. And I'm going to heal myself up 2. And we'll keep going until somebody stops. Now, this is because it's a resource management aspect in this game. I only have so many cards in my hand. I may run out of cards very quickly, or I may want to save cards so that I have cards available to discard to increase my movement. Because don't forget, at the end of my round, my die is going to go down by 1. So if I'm already at maybe a 4, I'm going to be going down to a 3 at the end of my turn. So maybe I want to save some cards for next turn so I can move a little bit faster. Or maybe I say, you know what? Oh, I'm all in on this combat. I'm going to throw down all of my cards. My opponent can yield at any time. And when they yield, then I can keep going and playing as many cards or crystals, because I can also play crystals. But let's say my opponent's not ready to yield. They're going to play another color of their card, and they're going to push me back another 2 points. Boom, boom. Now at this point, I'm going to do a special type of action. I'm going to play a card sideways on top of 2 other cards. And what that's going to do is that's going to add the values, but first off, it has to be my color. So I couldn't lay a yellow one sideways here. So I would lay it here, and I would add up the value of both of these 2. Since this was a 2 and this was just a 1 for me, that's going to give me 3. So I'm going to push my opponent back three times. My opponent in that case, if they played another yellow on here, that would give them 4 points. But in this case, they are going to, let's have them just go ahead and lay down a yellow. That's going to give them 4 points. They're going to push me back 1, 2, 3, 4. And now it's my turn. Now, I could yield here if I'm out of cards, or maybe I'm out of cards, but I have crystals and I want to play a crystal. There's a couple of things I can do. First thing is I can play a crystal on top of a card, or I can play a crystal down on the board side. Now, this is going to do a couple of different things. So if I play a crystal on top of a card like so, that is on top of 2 other cards, I can actually swap places with my opponent. And so I can either jump to where they are on the board. If my opponent had healed, I could play 1 crystal to heal to the same point that they are, or I can pull them back to where I am. So if I'm at a -6, I can basically, it's kind of like a life swap where we both become the same life, and I choose which one we're at. And so that can be a great way to kind of even the odds a little bit. But maybe I want to play a card over here. Maybe we're a little bit closer and I don't feel like doing that. If I play a crystal down here, I then get to take the die, the battle die, from over here, and then I get to roll that die, and that stays with me for the rest of the combat. So even if my opponent played a crystal, they are not going to be able to gain a yellow die, but there's still a green die and a red die. So there's basically 1 die here for each color, and I can roll that, and that's how many points I get. Now this die is also a D6, but it has 2 3s, 2 4s, and 2 5s. So I would roll that, and I'd get a 4, and so I can now push my opponent 1, 2, 3, 4. I can push them that many times. Maybe my opponent's going to do the same, and they're going to play a red crystal in their board. They're going to gain this red die, and they're going to gain 5. They're going to heal up 1, 2, or 3, 4, 5, or whatever it is. And maybe they're done. Maybe they say they're done now. They think they've gotten me beat, and I could either yield or I could try one more time. And maybe I have another crystal. I can still play. I continue to play crystals at this point. And since I have the yellow die, I can keep rolling it, but I can't play red crystals to roll this die. If I have red crystals, what I can do is I can always discard any 2 crystals to make them into a wild. And I could roll again, and I got a 5, and since I'm at -4, I'm going to knock this guy back to -5, and now I stop. He already yielded, so he's done, and now I've won. Although at a significant cost, because maybe I spent all of my crystals and all of my cards, and now I'm going to be very weak for the next battle. So what happens if I win? Well, first thing is I'm going to take one of my opponent's pink crystals. These are kind of like their soul or their life crystals. And these are going to give you negative victory points at the end of the game, which is important. But also, if I get all 4 of these, I instantly win. So if I can win 4 combats against my opponent, that's going to be one way to win. Now, I get to take this crystal and put this on my player board. And so that's going to go right here into one of my slots. And this one also counts as a wild. So I get to use this for whatever I want. So there's plenty of incentive to win. But we also have this pink area. All right, this pink area on the board here. And let's say I was able to push my opponent all the way back into the pink. I really wanted to go for the kill. Well, I'll still win. And by the way, if I get to the pink, I'm not instantly out. I can always try to heal up from the pink. But if I end the battle in the pink, then my character is kind of knocked out. And there's some consequences for that. Because the winner of a combat, right? Let's go back to over here. So after the battle is resolved, whoever won the battle will go back to their starting area. So if the shaman lost, the shaman goes back here. If it was a follower who lost, he'll go back to his little rock. Now, the other interesting thing is that if you lost the battle, but also if you lost it in the pink, so that means if your shaman on the battle board ended the battle all the way here and you lost, then that character is, in addition to being sent away, they're also downgraded. So if it's a shaman that lost, they're going to go down to a follower and have to go back to the follower starting area. And if it's a follower who is lost, then they're killed. And that's dangerous because if you lose all of your characters, that's another way to instantly lose the game. So you want to make sure you're getting new followers out there. And one way you can do that is by making your way all the way into your opponent's hearth in the starting area, and then you get to spawn a new follower out in your own starting area. So the game ends when 3 of these entire stacks have been depleted, or when a player fills up their entire board with all of the different magic lands. When all 6 are filled up, that will trigger endgame, and then you will count up victory points. That's assuming somebody didn't outright win through combat. So this is the other way the game can end, is just by triggering endgame, and then you will start adding up victory points on the victory point tracker here. You will have added any points that are endgame to any points that you've earned already, and determine the winner. So that is basically the good summary of how you play Ynarros Fallin, but there's a lot more to be learned than just what we've talked about in today's video. For example, there are different levels of play. For example, a lot of these locations have a 1 pip on them, but there are other ones that have 2 pips, for example. You can play at experience level 2, so basically advance the rules up a little bit, which is a nice thing to do. You also have double-sided boards, so in addition to this board and the way that the crystals go over here, you are also going to have a whole different way to play with different tokens that can become available. You have a couple of extra game components to have different variants. Talking about some of the level 2 and level 3 stuff. At level 2, for more advanced play, one of the extra rules that happen are these shadow tile systems. And basically this allows you to kind of complicate the game board a little bit, where you can take some of the normally empty hexes and you can kind of change the way the board is. You might put down blue shadow tiles to give yourself a little bit easier movement. Of course, your opponent's shadow tiles will be slightly different. And then, of course, there are the darker shadow tiles as well. And these all change the way that you move around the board and make every game a little bit different. Additionally, there's also level 3 with the extra experience tokens, and a lot more for you to learn about as you dig deeper and deeper into this game. On top of that, there is also an expansion coming, the Dark Adventures, which adds monsters and even solo play. So definitely check that out. If you want to learn more, you should really check out the Kickstarter link in the description below. So that's going to do it, folks. This has been Ynarros Fallin. Let me know what you think down in the comments section. Love to hear from you guys, and be sure to check out the Kickstarter link and give them some support. And love to hear what you guys think of this game. By the way, I think the art is beautiful here. It's a really cool art style. I really like the color palette and just the art of the effects. These little cartoony shaman are just too cute. All right, I want to thank you all so much for watching, and big thanks to Peakwick Dreams for supporting and sponsoring this video. I will talk to you guys later. May the force be with you. Live long and prosper. Be excellent to each other. Party on, dudes, and have a great day.